Okay. Is there any specific format, or we're just going to go where the wind takes us?
We're kind of doing the wind thing.
Excellent.
Yeah, because the show is... Are you putting shelves up? Take your seat, movie fans. The film is about to start. Welcome to Craft to Services, the show where we look at the bad films of cinematic history, the movies that critics rejected but audiences embraced. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, a.k.a. Caliban. I'm also the host of the Just Enough Trope podcast and the Enterprising Individuals podcast on this, the Just Enough Trope Network. Find out more at justenough.trope.com. Joining me on the show today is Melissa F. Olson, author of Dead Spots and the Scarlet Bernard series, also the Boundary Magic series, as well as Nightshades with Tor.com Publishing, and more. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm so excited to do this.
Good to have you here. Good to have someone on this safari with me. It's dangerous to go alone. You're an author of urban fantasy, but you're a movie fan too. Is it safe to say that you're a bad movie fan?
Yes and no. I actually studied film at the University of Southern California. So I actually sort of was educated in this stuff, which makes it almost worse when I like really terrible movies.
Yeah.
When I was in college, there were a lot of people talking about like the most recent silent French film. And I would be like, yeah, but seriously, how funny is Jaws the Revenge?
Right. And that's a good film school too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is quite a very good film school. Yeah. And my initial intention was to kind of work in that industry, and then the fates kind of aligned themselves differently, and I ended up writing. But I still love a good bad movie. Not as much with alcohol as I used to, but still.
Sure. Yeah.
Still.
Those lubricants certainly help. What do you get? What's the joy of a good bad film?
That's a great question. When I was in college, we had this instructor who, they get actual filmmakers to teach the classes at USC because they're right there in LA. So why not? And this gentleman, who is an awesome guy, and one of his biggest features on his IMDb page was the movie Silent Predators, which is one of those sci-fi Saturday afternoon horror movie of the week things.
Right.
And so being just a bunch of degenerates as we were, we hounded this poor instructor until finally he got us a copy to watch together on VHS, because that's like all he had. And so we went to like this was a very small class, like maybe 12 kids. We were pretty tight. So we went to the one of our houses which had a VCR. And we sat there and we did tequila shots and we watched this movie. And oh my gosh, my 12-year-old dog is named for one of the characters in this movie, for real. Because it is so freaking funny. It's Harry Hamlin just at his best.
Yeah.
And like every time you think it can't get more ridiculous, they would go into snake vision, where we are now seeing from the snake's perspective. So the camera's like a foot off the ground and it's red. Because as we know, snakes only see in murder red.
Right, exactly.
So, whenever I think about bad movies, I think about this specific experience of being in a group of people my age, sitting around laughing our asses off at this movie. And it wasn't funny just because it was a professor, although that was, a marvelous icing on the cake.
Right.
It was funny because it's so ridiculous that you laugh. And at that time, I'm not sure they were intentionally funny. Eventually sci-fi kind of wised up to the fact that everyone was laughing at their movies and they decided to roll into it, which I appreciate. But at this point, I think they were still trying to make horror movies. And, just something about the honest effort combined with the hilarious result is just very appealing to me.
Yeah. It's like the absence of cynicism.
Yes, I agree. And it's also, it doesn't require much of you. I was talking recently about the movie Wonder Woman, which is a fantastic film. I hope it wins many Oscars. I'm so proud of how it's done and what it does for women and female filmmakers. But the truth is that watching that movie is kind of rough because it gives you all the feelings. It's so good that it makes you sad, it makes you happy, exuberant, depressed, grieving. Like it's an emotional ride because it's so good and so well made. And that's wonderful, and I'm so glad those movies are being made. But there's also something to be said for the movie that doesn't require anything of you. Yeah. For where you just all you're supposed to do is sit back, laugh, goof off on your cell phone, and enjoy it as much as you feel like.
Escape.
Yeah, I think there's a place for that too. Yeah. And a lot of my film school compatriots would probably disagree with me, but like I went and saw The Mummy 2 times in theaters.
Oh, really? Okay.
I sure did. No regrets. # no regrets, because it is silly and campy and fun, and it doesn't require anything of me except like the ticket price. Yeah. And I went to 10 a.m. shows, so not a lot of money
right,
on that. But
right, yeah.
I do appreciate, with life being as stressful as it is these days, I have a great appreciation for movies that are meant to entertain us in a very relaxed, no strings attached kind of way.
Yeah, I agree. Like The Mummy was very fun, and I was pulled down a little bit while watching it not because of, like you said with Wonder Woman, there are like very important things being discussed, but the whole desire by studios to like push this into a franchise, and like now I watch movies and instead of being able to have fun, I'm like making sure that I'm seeing the Easter eggs or the setups that they're doing for like the next film. So that made me I was a little tense about that. But yeah, if you can just sit back and just have a lot of fun with that film.
Yeah, I mean the moment where Russell Crowe, like they do such a great bait and switch with Russell Crowe because he has the opening voiceover that explains everything, and you're like, oh, okay, Russell Crowe has a mortgage and he needs to like get a paycheck for like having a gravelly voice. Sure, all right. So he does like a couple of these scenes with the exposition, and you're just kind of leaned back and you're sort of you've resigned yourself to this version of him, and then he does the switch where he goes from being Henry Jekyll to Mr. Hyde. Right. And because they've spent, 45 minutes of the movie lulling you into thinking that he's got this throwaway character, it's just so intensely fun.
Yeah, he gets a lot more fun.
He does. Yeah. And it came out of nowhere because obviously you're waiting for it to happen, but I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Did you hear, just on a little bit of current events, what James Cameron said about the Wonder Woman film recently?
No, I didn't.
He said, and I'm totally paraphrasing because it's one of those articles that I sort of hate read for a while and like flipped away, but he basically he doesn't know what everybody's so excited about with the new Wonder Woman movie, and he sees it as the same kind of like exploitative thing that Hollywood has done throughout its existence, and of course tried to turn the conversation back to a character like Sarah Connor, who's not glamorous, and we're not worried about how she looks, and she's a bad mom, and she's flawed and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a tough balancing act. It's hard to say this is the perfect feminist film, especially because our understanding of what feminist means continually evolves. Right. For example, this movie and Wonder Woman is an established property. You can't just say, okay, this is gritty Sarah Connor Wonder Woman. Like there are certain beats you have to hit. Yeah. I know, right? Yeah. That would be my Wonder Woman show. No, they made so many changes in such subtle, brilliant ways. Like she no longer runs around in a tube top. Did you notice she has a strap? Right. So, for years and years, comic book readers, especially female comic book readers, have complained that it is kind of unrealistic and silly for her to be running around in like a corset because, when you're running and you have boobs. And
lots of jumping, lots of landing.
Accidents can happen, man.
Right.
And that's not very, majestic and superhero-ish. I mean, maybe it is, but it's also not PG-13. Anyway.
Right, yeah. And Patty Jenkins actually said something to that effect. I don't think it was in response, but just when she was talking about the film, that, like, people are complaining about this, and she's like, what do you want? Like, we've given you this amazing story. We've shown her as a strong character. She dresses that way because that's the way the character's always dressed, and now you're going to tell her how to dress? Like, what is your issue here exactly?
Yeah. But she does have a strap for a lot of the movie. It's hidden under her hair. And so you don't notice it always until you see her from the back, and then you realize, oh, okay, that connects in the front under her hair. So they did this very kind of sneaky, sly thing where they made this change, but it's hard to see unless you're really watching for it, which I did because that's who I am.
Sure.
So yeah, I like Sarah Connor. I like Wonder Woman. I don't think there's like only one spot for a feminist character.
Right.
You know, it's not a contest. It should be more of like a welcoming party with lots and lots of people.
Right. Well, there's only room for James Cameron in James Cameron's world anyway, so.
Right.
Hey, as like a lot of movie fans and aspiring screenwriters or even film students, you worked for Blockbuster back in the day.
I did. Yes, I did.
All the screenwriters and critics I know have worked at a movie store at some point. What is the benefit for a movie fan? Like, why has everybody done that?
Well, I'm kind of the worst person to ask this question because I worked at the Blockbuster in Hollywood on La Cienega.
Oh, wow.
So I literally waited on Tom Cruise.
Wow, okay.
When he was dating Penelope, they came in together. They were, as one would expect, pocket-sized. And, and you know, I checked them out, and by that I mean I rang them up at the cash register.
Right.
I mean, I also kind of checked them out, not in a creepy way, but you know what I mean.
Right.
So you know, for me, it's hard to say, oh, there's no benefit to it because, hey, like, I met Tom Cruise because of Blockbuster, you know?
Right.
But I think that one of the reasons there's that connection is because, like, with Blockbuster, you got 5 free movie rentals a week.
Okay.
So and often it was a movie that was not coming out until the following week.
Oh, okay.
Because the employees get them early. Mm-hmm. So it's almost a sort of self-education in film, because if you grow up in the Midwest like I do, where nothing should ever be wasted, you start like setting that goal for yourself to be watching 5 movies a week.
Right.
And I remember the summer that I was 18, before I left for school, I was determined to see some of these classic movies that I'd never actually made the time to sit down and watch.
Right.
And so I used my Blockbuster employee-ship to rent like Casablanca and The Godfather and Clockwork Orange and all these different movies that like everyone talked. This was shortly after AFI did their 100 Years, 100 Movies thing.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, thank you for just doing my summer homework for me.
Right.
So I kind of went down that list. So to me, there were tremendous benefits in working there. I mean, the amount of money I would have had to pay to rent that many movies that summer would have been
the reality of a pre-streaming society.
Yes. And I know that Blockbuster has and did and still does get a lot of hate, but I gotta say that company was amazing for me because I worked there in high school, I worked there in college. When I came home and I had a baby and I couldn't find a day job that would make me enough money to pay for daycare, I worked nights at Blockbuster.
Oh, nice.
You know, so I mean, like, being a Blockbuster employee saved me on many occasions.
I wish that I had the same experience.
Not so much?
The one of 2 times that I attempted to get a job at a movie store, I never actually worked at one, was one of the interviews was at Blockbuster. And I think I lost them right around the time that they asked me to pretend you're recommending a movie to a customer.
Uh-oh.
And I picked Hudson Hawk. And the guy's
What's
face
wrong
just,
with Hudson Hawk?
his eyes
everything?
and his face closed, and that interview was over at that point.
Aw, man.
I know,
Hudson
right?
Hawk should be on this podcast for just hilarious, weird, bad movies.
26% on Rotten Tomatoes. Someday.
Well,
anyway,
man.
The name of the show is Craft Services. We're still a newish show, so I'll go over once more what it's all about. It began as a segment on my show, the Just Enough Trope podcast, the idea that everybody has a movie that they love. that they would die defending, and that you could look at the score, the rating review, or at the Rotten Tomato score, and it's below 50%, and you're like, what? Huh? How is that? So on this show, we'll be looking at some of those films. The big rule for the show is the films we pick, with few, if any, exceptions, must be rated 49% or below on Rotten Tomatoes or on Metacritic, and it has to be a film that is remembered fondly by at least you or somebody that you know. And before we continue, I got to state for the record, this show is not in the pocket of Big Tomato. We don't endorse Rotten Tomatoes. We're not even connected to them. In fact, this show may end up...
Wait a minute. Are you in the pocket of Big Tomato? That sounds...
Yeah. No, we're not.
That sounds like a whole different mob being run by Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Oh, man, it's Big Tomato. What are you going to do?
No ketchup on us at all.
It's like Big Oil.
I guarantee. And this show, we may end up being a fairly solid repudiation of Rotten Tomatoes. We'll see.
We'll see.
As a movie fan yourself, what do you think of sites like Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic?
I have some mixed thoughts. Recently, Brett Ratner had an interview where he bemoaned how Rotten Tomatoes was ruining all of Hollywood and film.
Okay, sure.
I've
seen a lot of think pieces like that recently.
Yeah, and it personally destroyed his career.
Oh, please.
I think these are tools.
And
you decide how much you use a tool and how important it is to you.
Yeah.
If you decide that you are going to live and die by Rotten Tomatoes and you will never see a movie unless it's rated fresh, then you've kind of put yourself into a box here. You've limited yourself.
Right.
And maybe that's what you're into. That's fine. But I think that Rotten Tomatoes is brilliant as a guiding tool that you have to really consider before you go see a movie. Or that you have to consider how important you're going to make it, I should say. When The Mummy came out, I really wanted to go see it because I love the ancient Egyptian stuff. I was so intrigued by the whole Penny Dreadful in the modern day kind of premise of doing this dark universe. I was disappointed that Tom Cruise was in it, but there were so many things that I was interested in. And then it came out and it got a 13%.
Right.
And I could have, and I almost did say, oh, nope, 13 is it's too low. I can't do it.
Yeah.
But I just kind of said, you know what? Screw it. This is a movie I want to see. I think I might get enjoyment out of it because it checks these certain boxes that appeal to me personally. Yeah. And I had a great time. I don't regret it for a second. I actually went back with my husband because I started being afraid that I was just losing it because I'm this isn't that bad. And I actually made my husband, but no, I didn't make him. He was interested by then because I had talked about it for 2 hours. He went back with me and he's like, you're right, this isn't that bad. So these were two fun experiences that I could have robbed myself of if I took Rotten Tomatoes as law.
Yeah. Something else you lose with the aggregation aspect is that usually, and especially you've experienced this, I'm sure, living in a small town or living in the Midwest, is that you get your local reviewer or there's one or two of them and you don't necessarily agree with them, but you can kind of gauge off of oh, he didn't like it, so I will. And once you eliminate that and you've got 100 different reviewers, there's no guidepost anymore to well, how do I interpret this score?
Oh, yeah. That's been one of the really one of many unfortunate things to come out of, with the internet, newspapers trying to find their place among the internet is we've lost many, many, many local movie critics. Mm-hmm. It used to be that every decent-sized paper had their own designated movie critic, and now most of them get it from the AP, or they reprint, whoever's posting these days at rogerebert.com or whatever.
Right.
So you no longer have, the people of Minneapolis having their own guy. Maybe they do. This is just an example.
Sure.
I don't know about Minneapolis, but I don't think Madison does. If there is a designated film critic, they can only do a movie after it comes out usually because they're not in LA, and the whole business has really changed a lot. So it's harder to have one person that you can trust. Yeah. And I think that that's something they don't really take into account when people complain about Rotten Tomatoes, is that we've lost so many of our alternatives. We've lost so many of that one voice of the guy that you listen to.
Yeah.
For me, I really like Entertainment Weekly's reviewers, but even then I'll kind of watch because, there's one guy that really favors the like tiny foreign movies that
Right.
he won't like anything that's big budget, at all, just on principle and so forth. So you kind of got to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I used to read Entertainment Weekly all the time, and I really kind of broke up with them and got mad at one of the reviewers when she gave Fight Club an F. And
really?
Well, it's a polarizing film.
It is.
And
that's true.
Fincher was definitely not capital F Fincher back then. And I get now, 20 years later, that she just didn't get it. And that's fine. And I could have, continued to read that reviewer and see what else she thought about stuff. But I just thought, how could she doesn't understand. And so we were divorced after that. Like, I just went on to greener pastures.
Nice. I love that you blew the entire magazine because of one review.
Well,
go ahead.
You can get a lot of that information on the internet now anyway. I mean, the magazine itself is pretty much dead.
I've had an Entertainment Weekly subscription since I was 14 years old.
Wow.
So I have honestly had an Entertainment Weekly subscription longer than I haven't had an Entertainment Weekly subscription.
That's amazing.
I know, right? It's kind of sad and makes me sound lonely. I do not have any cats. Like, I'm not sitting alone in a room with them right now.
Sure.
But when I lived in LA, when I was going to USC, I wrote for the school newspaper, which sounds kind of like cheesy and Nancy Drew-ish. But in LA, they send the Daily Trojan writers to the big leagues.
Sure.
So I went to a lot of film junkets and got to like write up features and reviews on movies. And, some of them were really little, and I would take it because, I was a sophomore and they gave them the grunt movies.
Sure.
But then I had like the Fellowship of the Rings junket, or the X2 junket or whatever.
Right.
So I actually am familiar with the experience of actual review writing. And I know how difficult it is because on the one hand, you are just desperate to have your own original opinion. And on the other hand, you're also desperate to know what everybody else is saying because what if you're wrong?
Right. Yeah.
Like, unless you're super confident and therefore kind of dick-like, it's really hard to say, this is what I think, and I stand by it, and that is that.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I'm kind of impressed with that reviewer that gave Fight Club an F, because she didn't, like, look around and go, a lot of people are giving this an amazing review. Maybe I need to think about this.
Right.
Nope. She committed
She's out.
to her thesis. She, like, leaned into that, and that's impressive.
Yeah. The few reviews that I've written for the web magazine here, I've done the same thing where it's like, I'll come home from the screening and then I put my thoughts down and I so badly want to look at like what anybody else. Yeah, because I'm like, am I saying the right thing? And I have to go, no, I'm just gonna, even if I pull off in a really weird direction. And we got a lot of flack for my Guardians of the Galaxy 2 review, which was positive, but I had a lot of like things to say about it that I didn't like.
There were qualms. I had qualms.
Right. Yeah, and I would lose any of that if I was like, no, well, it's pretty good. It's not as good as the first one, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I had to be honest. Well, this film didn't fare too well on any review site. Today we're adventuring into Congo, where you are the endangered species.
Well, and I need to mention, based on your intro, that this is not a movie I would die defending.
Okay.
If we were talking like a bad movie or a generally understood to be bad movie that I would die defending, that would probably be Last Action Hero. Which was just way freaking ahead of its time. And when you watch that movie now, OMG. But Congo is a terrible movie that is bad, but it is terrible and bad in fun and interesting ways.
Yes, and maybe we can flip-flop on this one because after having seen it, and I think I was telling you before we started heated the mics up that I'm not sure I've actually seen it before. And watching it, I might die defending this.
Really?
Well, here's the thing. I think we've spoken about this before. I think we were talking at Convergence this year about bad films. And like for me, it's always been one of the reasons I started this segment and this show is that I never got why my movie fan friends enjoyed bad movies so much. For me, the whole thing is, you're doing it wrong if you watch a bad movie. You don't want to catch a brick. You want to watch a good movie.
Sure.
And so I started this like quest where I'm watching these bad movies, and somewhere in the middle of this long, boring slog through the jungle with Ernie Hudson playing a British guy,
the great white hunter who happens to be black.
That is a quote from the movie, not me being
labeling right there.
I just reached this point, this unbearable lightness of being, where I was just like, okay, movie, I'm ready. Bring it on. I am for you, movie. Just whatever you got. Come on, just get it all out here. I want to see what you got.
Well, did you look into it all, the making of this movie and how it kind of came about?
Well, I definitely want to talk about that in one sec. Let me get the particulars out of the way. It is Congo. It is 22% on Rotten Tomatoes, 22 on Metacritic, and a 5.1 on IMDb. All pretty bad. It came out in 1995, and it was directed by Frank Marshall, the super producer, Frank Marshall, of course, husband to Kathleen Kennedy, who helped start Amblin Entertainment and produced pretty much all of Spielberg's films and a lot of other things in the modern era, like the Bourne movies and Benjamin Button's Sixth Sense, that sort of thing. And it was written by John Patrick Shanley, who I have a whole thing about that we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, please tell me about the making of this film.
Well, so Michael Crichton, who wrote the book, actually pitched this as a movie before he ever wrote the book. And when he pitched it, what he was interested in was making a movie that was more like King Solomon's Mines. And I had to look this up because I didn't know. But Alan Quarterman, who is Sean Connery's character in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and that's how I knew that.
Right.
So King Solomon's Mines is an adventure story about Alan Quarterman, and it kicked off what is sort of seen as this sub-genre of the Lost World movie. And that's not capital letters, those are lower letters, which is just a movie where you travel to like a distant, often jungle paradise in search of something, and you run into all these problems with both man and nature along the way.
Right.
And so Crichton pitched Congo as that, as a new, fresh King Solomon's Mines, but with gorillas, and sort of couched in these very interesting scientific developments in, the study of gorillas.
Right.
And all that sounded interesting. And then he realized, and they actually got quite far into production and casting. And then he found out that there are no gorillas that can do this, that could perform, the role that becomes the role of Amy. He kind of assumed that, somewhere out there was a gorilla with just dreams of Hollywood, I guess.
Right. Yeah, get me the gorilla.
Just like, casting
get some
something.
Headshots.
I don't know. Yeah, get some headshots of gorillas.
Right.
But once he started to really look into it and discovered that there were no gorillas that could perform in this way, he dropped the project. And then he went off and he wrote the book. And the book came out in 1980.
Right.
Which is still a long, long time before the success of Jurassic Park.
That's right.
So then you flash forward to 1993, and Jurassic Park has become not only a successful book, but also a tremendously successful movie. Mm-hmm. And as always happens, when there's a tremendous success, Hollywood started looking for the next Jurassic Park. And Jurassic Park is a movie that I love to death. It is in my top 10 movies of all time, easily.
Sure.
It is amazing and that it holds up very well today. But what it really boils down to is that it's a creature feature.
Yeah.
Right? It's a movie about humans against these creatures that they have underestimated, and the creatures go crazy and start killing them.
Right.
Like, that's a very old genre. It just happens to be a remarkably well done example.
Yeah.
So then what happens is you have Congo, the book, which is, the kind of King Solomon's Mines, Lost World subgenre adventure. And then you have Jurassic Park, the creature feature, and you have a movie studio that is trying to smush those two ideas together and then have bad robot apes perform them.
Right.
And so it is actually this beautiful, perfect storm of nonsense.
Yes.
That is what you get out of all that. And it's so interesting because it's like, Dave Barry has a bit in one of his books about the most avoidable car accident in the world, which is where you have like this one idiot man who's driving in the like far right lane, and then you have the one idiot man who is, and that's not me, he says man specifically, who is coming up the on-ramp, and neither of them wants to move over for the other. And so the cars crash.
Very slowly together.
Very slowly together. And it is the accident that everyone can see happening and no one stops.
Yeah.
Like at any moment to say, hey, maybe something's off here.
Yeah.
Maybe we should stop. So
I was looking at a list of the movies that Frank Marshall has produced, and it's extensive. I mean, he and his wife Kathleen Kennedy have produced many, many movies, and at some point you must just. Not everything is going to be a winner. Do you know what I mean? Like when and as an artist, I'm sure you feel this. You want everything to be the best. Maybe you feel like something isn't as strong as something else, but that mindset of the producer must be, we've got A, talent, we've got B, a storyline that's halfway coherent, we've got C, some kind of hook like gorillas or diamonds or lasers or something. Toss it out there, and then I guess you never know whether it's going to succeed or not.
Well, the thing is, Frank Marshall is known for producing great movies.
Yeah.
But he's not just the producer of this movie. He's the director. And that's very significant because up until this movie, the only feature films that he had directed was Arachnophobia, which was his first feature, and which is an okay little B movie.
Yeah.
And then a movie called Alive, which I had never heard of until I was looking up Congo.
Soccer team movie.
Yeah, it's like a soccer team. So, I don't know if it did well or not, but the point is that we think of Frank Marshall for all these like great huge blockbusters, but a producer has a very different role from a director.
Yeah.
And it's also a role that has a whole spectrum of involvement. Like
Yes.
Sometimes producer is just like making a couple of phone calls and introducing a few people to each other. Sometimes producer is like on set most days, but director is like the guy,
Right. Yeah. Or
the lady.
He also directed after this 8 Below, the Paul Walker sled dog movie.
Yes, he did. And you know what? Not a lot else.
No, that's true. And while we're talking about people who do one thing and aspire to direct, we can talk about Michael Crichton himself.
Oh,
who
yeah.
has directed several films.
And he originally was going to direct Congo in the first iteration.
And he had written it for Sean Connery because I guess he had so much fun working with him on Last Train Robbery or Great Train Robbery.
Which you don't hear a lot about Sean Connery.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I had so much fun with you. That's
Right.
just that's not going to be on his tombstone.
Yeah. And a lot of the films that he ended up doing would be great additions to this show. Like Runaway with the robot spiders and Tom Selleck.
Crichton was a very interesting guy. And, I was reading that when he was, and I don't know if this is true, it's just on the internet, but I was reading that when he was plotting Congo, he would actually go to an isolation chamber.
Right.
And like lay and float and plot the movie.
Right, yeah.
And I cannot decide if that is just like a ridiculous douchebag affectation or like the most genius plotting strategy I've ever heard. I honestly don't know.
How does he write?
Go either way.
When you have an idea, how does he write something down?
Yeah, there's that.
Just
he must just plan it and like keep a notebook right outside. Maybe he has like a whiteboard in there with him.
Right, he's writing on the lid of the thing and with a marker.
That would be kind of awesome, actually.
It's crazy. Yeah, but all those films that we named, the robot spiders and the whatever, they all share that sort of scientific background that he's got.
Sure.
And he's definitely putting that in here. So, and whenever I've read like articles about this, there's a good one on Den of Geek. They talk about how they just tossed the book. I feel like a lot of the book is still sort of there a little bit.
They did keep some of it, yeah. They changed a lot of the important stuff, and a lot of the characterizations have shifted. Laura Linney's character, Ross, is very, very different.
Yeah.
In the book, she is like an ice queen. In fact, this is something I wanted to talk about. I almost prefer the movie version of Ross.
Okay.
Because when I was watching it, again for this, and there are so many ridiculous problems with this movie, most of them leading back to the fact that they did not have the technology to make the movie they wanted to make.
Yeah.
But Ross is actually kind of a fantastic character. She's a complete badass. She does not have a romantic love interest at all. Like, she used to date one of the characters, but it's not really a thing.
No.
But she's never sexualized. She doesn't wear a bikini. She doesn't cry on screen.
Right.
She's ex-CIA, and she wears khaki and baseball caps. And she's very pragmatic and cool under pressure.
Right.
And if you look at, like, the other kind of big action movies that were coming out at this time, you have GoldenEye, which is a Bond movie where, like, a woman kills somebody with her thighs, and
Right.
Batman Forever, where Nicole Kidman just kind of like purrs around in slinky dresses.
Right. That was your problem.
So, even Jurassic Park had to stick in a romantic relationship between Ellie and Grant and make them partners, which was not in the book.
Right.
So the one thing I just legitimately respect about this movie is what they did with Laura Linney's character, because she's a very unconventional action movie heroine at the time. And the fact that there really isn't anybody who like calls her a bitch or like makes jokes about having sex with her, like you have she's on this expedition with all these men and they all treat her with respect.
Right.
Like, these are not things that are common tropes in action movies of the 90s.
I'm trying to remember. I went through a Crichton phase, probably like a lot of people, after Jurassic Park came out, and I read pretty much all of his books that I could get my hands on at the time. And as I was watching this, I was trying to remember if I had watched or read Congo, and I don't remember. Like, I remember something.
You would remember the ape research, because that book is like 90% ape research.
I kind of remember that, and I remember like bits with the balloon. So I feel like I probably read it, but it's neither here nor there.
Okay, wait. I can solve this. Do you remember stone paddles?
Stone paddles? I don't think so.
Okay, because in the book, first of all, the book has way better action scenes than the movie, which is kind of ridiculous. Movie, way to go. So do you know the scene in the movie where they have like set up a perimeter fence and the apes are like attacking it frequently?
Right.
That is a huge sequence in the book, and it's actually very similar to Aliens. Only I believe the book came first, where they're counting down the rounds and they're basically like counting down to their own death.
Right.
I want to say it came out in Congo first.
Okay.
But the whole creepy thing about these white apes, which are frankly terrifying in the book, is that they use tools.
Yeah.
They don't kill people by sort of running up to them and menacing, which is what they seem to do in the movie. They
right.
Don't they kind of just like wiggle at them in a threatening manner, and then the people are like
and they die.
In blood?
Yeah.
No, in the book, the people who originally trained the apes to be their guard dogs gave them stone paddles. These white stone paddles. Think of like a wooden canoe paddle.
Yeah.
And what the apes would do is they would tuck the handle they would have two paddles, and they would tuck a handle under each arm, and they would clap the paddles together and squish someone's head.
Okay. That does sound familiar. But in the book, they're not just apes, they're like human ape hybrids or something like that.
That could be correct.
Yeah.
I haven't read it in 20 years either. But man, the stone paddles made an impression because they were genuinely frightening. And part of it is that they have learned to use tools and they have learned to use weapons.
Right. Well, they're a lot more menacing in the book than they are in the film.
Oh my gosh, they're ridiculous.
They're barely in the film, yeah. We'll talk about that. I wanted to finish up real quick talking about the writer and the director, specifically about Frank Marshall. Doing research about him, I learned something that I didn't know about him, is that in addition to being a super producer, he also is a DJ and he's a magician as well. And he's known as DJ Master Frank and Dr. Fantasy when he performs magic.
Wow.
Everybody's got to have a hobby.
I tend to just sort of think of him as Kathleen Kennedy's arm candy, but okay.
Right, sure. Yeah, you can. He's at Lay, as in like L.A. French, Lay Doctor on Twitter, and he retweets people who go, "Thanks, Dr. Fantasy, for doing some magic tricks," or "Hey, I met DJ Master Frank at this, at this record shop, and it's so exciting."
Wow.
There's a Lego, there might be in the movie too, I'm not sure, but there's a Lego Jurassic World character named DJ Master Frank after him.
I did not know that.
Now, put your tinfoil hat on. That connects to the fact that there is Jimmy Buffett's in this film. And we'll talk about.
He's in Congo, which is I did not know.
And they're big buddies. And then people think that Jimmy Buffett is in Jurassic World because there's a guy with the margaritas or whatever, but nobody's ever really confirmed that. But it's all connected, man. Well, John Patrick Shanley, this drives me nuts because this guy, he's a well-known, he's an Oscar-winning writer or screenwriter. He wrote Moonstruck.
Okay.
And he also wrote Joe versus the Volcano. Okay, going down a little bit.
Not known for being a great film. Yes.
Right. He wrote Doubt, both the stage play and the screenplay.
All right.
And directed Doubt as well. He's just all over the map. And my thing is, and he wrote Alive, like I said before. He also wrote a movie that I covered on Just Enough Trump, one of the worst films I've ever seen, but that same sort of, what is going on? It's a Kevin Kline movie, a movie called The January Man. Oh,
I hadn't even heard of that.
Which is not very good. So
no kidding, really?
As a writer, can you maybe tell me, are there times that you take it seriously and there's times that you're just like punching a time card or something? Like, how could you make Moonstruck and then make We're Back a dinosaur story?
Okay, well, this is a screenwriter novelist discrepancy, because the thing with screenwriting is that there are so many fingerprints on every finished movie.
Oh, sure.
And so most of the time, the movie that is made is miles away from the original screenplay.
Okay.
So then what it often becomes is sort of complicated blame game for who did what. And I mean that in both the positive and negative way. Like sometimes you have a crap script and then you hire some brilliant script doctor who, by the way, will never get credit anywhere. You will never find it online. Sure. And they turn everything around. So I know nothing about this for sure, but just an example, it's completely possible that Moonstruck he did the first draft and then 6 other screenwriters handled it, but had a deal to not say that they handled it.
Okay.
Or it's possible that he wrote the first draft and it was brilliant, and the reason Congo is bad is because then the studio hired 6 other screenwriters and didn't tell anybody.
Sure.
So it's a shell game when it comes to screenwriting. Whereas as a novelist, one of the reasons I love writing fiction is because, good or bad, what's out there is mine.
Yeah.
You know, there's going to be an editor that had some contributions, and a good editor has great contributions that make my work better. Yeah. But ultimately, I don't have to say yes to anything. They can't rip giant holes in my book and publish it without my permission or knowledge. That's just not a thing.
Yeah.
Whereas once you write a screenplay and you sell it, you have to negotiate how much further involvement you'll have. And it could be none or it could be a ton.
Right. And it's something like with Doubt, where he's written the play and then he adapts the screenplay. He's directing it. He lands Meryl Streep and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Like, it turns out great because nobody messed with it. Right.
So, that's a really hard thing to judge. My guess is that Congo had... And then, sometimes you do get multiple screenwriters and it works out okay, which is what happened with Spider-Man Homecoming. I want to say there were 6 credited screenwriters. Yeah, there were 6. Yeah. Usually I've found upwards of 3 and you're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Like because often you have writing partners with screenplays. And then, so 2 is totally normal and fine. Sometimes you can get like a third person in there, or it's based on a novel and then they get credit or whatever. But once you get past 3...
I gotta say, Spider-Man Homecoming is the best film I've ever seen with 6 screenwriters, except maybe Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh yeah, that's fair. That's a different situation, but yes, that's fair.
So we got that locked away. And as far as the script goes, I don't think that it's a horrible script necessarily. There are certainly points where an artiste or somebody who considers themselves to be like a master of dialogue or wordsmith has added these little elements where you go, well, that's a touch. That's an artistic touch. Like, there's a reason that somebody is really obsessed with whether or not you're eating their sesame cake. And there's a reason
that's hilarious. That's one of my favorite parts. Stop eating my sesame cake.
Yes. Well, we could just talk about who's in this film. Delroy Lindo in an uncredited role. He doesn't. And then, of course, Tim Curry literally stops eating it by taking it out of his mouth. Or there's a part, where it just seems like every character has a very specific characterization. Like, very few people, I think, are winging it.
They have one quality.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, they have one quality, and it's like that's what their thing is. Ernie Hudson is the stereotype of the Great White Hunter character. Of course, he's not white, but he's that all the way through.
Yeah.
And so we've got these archetypes, these characters that have been assembled by this writer who goes, I'm going to make sense of this scribble on the lid of a sensory deprivation tank that was given to me.
Right. Ernie Hudson's character is fascinating because on the one hand, Ernie Hudson seems to be having the time of his life.
He has said in interviews that this is one of his, if not his most favorite role.
Right. And I can totally see that because this movie belongs to him and he owns his role. Except when you actually really listen, Monroe is the worst character because all he does in the whole movie is tell everyone who they are and what they're doing. Oh. So, so when he meets Mr. Homolka, the Tim Curry character, he just kind of immediately comes out and says, I remember you. You are the guy that did this and this. Yeah, and then he meets somebody else and he says, oh, I know exactly what you're doing. You're doing this and this, and we'll see how it turns out. Yeah. So his role is to kind of go through the movie and, he's a translator and he's translating the story to the audience.
Yeah, there's a lot of info dump from him in that way.
There is, but also just when he talks to the characters, he's telling them exactly who they are and their purpose in the movie,
right?
Which is so lazy, but at the same time, he says it so just cheerfully and with such charm that you're kind of just rolling with it.
Yeah, and his, like you said, his interpretation, his performance of the character is just takes you along. If you really listen to his accent, it's horrible,
And what is it? Like, what is that accent?
I don't even know.
I have no idea.
Yeah,
at least with Tim Curry, they tell you he's Romanian, and while I don't know any Romanian people that I could just verify that,
he is
at least he comes with a story.
Stock movie Romanian is what he is. Yeah, out of the box.
But it just has it's almost a like a Cary Grant accent.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
sort of old timey. I think my favorite scene in Congo is when they're in Africa, or one of my favorites certainly, is when they're in Africa and he is standing with Peter, poor Dylan Walsh, who's, this is just got to be the worst experience of his life. Right. Anyway, he's standing with Dylan Walsh and a silverback gorilla, not one of the magic white gorillas, but supposedly a regular gorilla, charges them. And Ernie Hudson's character is like, don't move. And he's like, yeah, I know, I've read the books, because he's actually a primatologist. Right. And then it kind of the camera does this very clever thing where they follow, Peter's character, and the gorilla runs away, and Peter turns to look at Ernie Hudson, and Ernie Hudson is gone, and he's like 50 feet away, and he's like, and Peter's like, what happened to you? And he's like, I ran away. That's it. And in the most cheerful, charming manner, I ran away.
Sorry about that.
You just gotta kind of love it. Most male hero characters, you'd think less of them for running away from a gorilla. Right. But because it's Ernie Hudson and because he's having the time of his life in this role, you laugh and it's funny. When really it's he should be the butt of the joke and he's not.
Right. Yeah. And he's got a black T-shirt on and a brown overshirt that's a button-up. And it makes me think of Winston Zeddemore, so that's fun.
Oh, there's one shot in this movie where he has a machine gun and he's holding it and he's kind of creeping forward and he's wearing a backpack. And and there's just this one shot where I was like, oh, stop everything. I'm having like a Winston flash moment. Right. And then I remember what movie I'm in and it's like, oh, it's just Congo.
Yeah, right. There are a lot of actors in this film that I would describe as they're going to come up on this show again. They're usual suspects in the sort of B-movie actor bouquet, except for Laura Linney, who at the time, was not as big as she is now. Yeah. Everybody on this list are all people who you could see in a sci-fi original film or on a USA series at any time. And we talked about Dylan Walsh, Ernie Hudson. I love that Joe Don Baker. Oh yeah, Joey Pants is in this.
Joey Pants is in this movie. I think they kind of hired solid, dependable character actors.
Right.
Like, these are the people who you would hire in fairly decent movies, but they would be like the guy that watches the moon landing on a screen, with a little microphone on his ear.
Right, yeah.
Like, it's that guy. He's
actually cast right in this film, because he's the guy who, drives the golf cart or whatever and then shows up once or twice to get them off
with the
on
most
their journey.
Brilliant
and then he's
shirt,
gone.
And by brilliant, I'm referring to the colors and not the quality. His shirt in this movie which he wears. I don't know. I honest to God couldn't tell you if they're two different shirts or if the first shirt has some sort of like sentience and it's sort of crept its colors around and it's still the same shirt.
Maybe
there's
it's
exciting stuff happening with that shirt.
Yes. And Joe Don Baker, of course, is in it in the beginning and the end. This blew me away. John Hawkes is in this. And John Hawkes is another guy who definitely went on to do more than this, but has still not really, even after his Oscar nomination for Winter's Bone, hasn't become like a big thing. But it's so weird to see him have literally like one line, which is like, gorilla, and then he just dies.
Well, and Bruce Campbell, man, I mean,
yeah.
He's an interesting choice because even by then, he is known for these, very tongue-in-cheek, comical horror movies.
Right.
And he does have a fantastic scream face, which I realized when I watched this again. That, like, you think of him for his comedy chops, but when he sees the great white ape and he really screams for the first time, you're like, man.
There it is.
I am scared for you, sir.
Yeah, it's weird. I heard that he had tried out for the role of Peter and didn't get it, and then they just gave him this. And like I said,
dodged a bullet, Bruce Campbell.
Well, maybe. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen him interact with the monkey with the power glove a little bit.
Oh my gosh!
But he's. Not having seen the film, I kept thinking, okay, he's the Dr. Livingston Stanley thing. Like they'll finally get there, and he's been alive somehow. Nope, just laying in a pile of bones.
Dead. Super dead.
Yep.
Spoiler alert.
Right. Well, this is all spoiled.
Can we just talk about poor Dylan Walsh and who he must have ruined to take this role? Because it is the hardest. Okay, not only is this poor actor who plays Dr. Peter Elliott, he's acting with a gorilla basically every time he's on screen. And it's not a real gorilla even. It's a robot gorilla.
Right.
And the movie takes great pleasure in implying some sort of romantic relationship between him and Amy. Did you notice this? Like many times, characters walk past him and the robot and look at them and like kind of like, elbow each other and say, ha ha, they're like husband and wife.
Yeah, right.
That happens like 6 times in this movie. Poor Dylan Walsh, like, must have just ruined someone's life to have to take this part where he is like romantically entangled with a robot gorilla.
Right. And it's so weird, like, just looking at his credits, like, this was the beginning of the end. Like, this is the biggest thing he's ever been in. And it wasn't a failure. It cost about $50 million. It made about $152 million. So, I mean, like, technically it was a success, but it didn't lead to anything for him.
No, in fact, I'm sure that it hurt his chances for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because this movie did become kind of a joke. I mean, I always think of Congo as the antithesis of Jurassic Park. It is like the dark double to Jurassic Park because the two of them have so much DNA in common.
I'm in your blood.
That was a good one. I have a Mr. DNA shirt that I wear every time there's a new Jurassic Park movie or like they show the original in theater or something. I go out in my Mr. DNA shirt. Anyway, they share so many just like on paper qualities,
Right.
And then but then you look at the final products and like Jurassic Park, I mean, you can watch that movie today and it's not like the science is perfect, but honestly, like the scares, the creatures, the story beats all hold up so well, And then you look at Congo, which even at the time it was like the technology was so bad, It's not like watching War Games where you watch that movie now and it's a joke,
no, it
but at the time it was kind of cutting edge,
Yeah, yeah.
This is not that because even when Congo came out in 95, it was the effects are just so terrible with the apes.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that the difference or the similarities between them. Like, it's not like Jurassic Park is The Godfather as far as script goes. Like, it's not, I feel like it's the same thing with sort of one-notish characters up against these circumstances. It was written by David Koepp, who's written a lot of great stuff, but they're very similar. So it's like, why do you think it is that one hit and one didn't, other than, tiny women in gorilla suits instead of CGI dinosaurs?
I think it's the genre clarity.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park knows that it's a creature feature, and its goal is to elevate that to dinosaurs.
Okay.
And honestly, like, if this was a race, Jurassic Park has been given like meth, or speed or something. Like it has gotten an unfair advantage because it's dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are cool. That's just one of the facts of life, man. Dinosaurs are cool. That is just that. And so Jurassic Park already had that going for it, but it's very comfortable and aware of the fact that it is a creature feature, and it is about man's hubris and man versus Mother Nature, and it also really celebrates dinosaurs both as terrifying monster and this awestruck like thing to be just really beheld and admired. The first scenes where we really see dinosaurs, not the scene where they get sucked into the raptor cage, but when we really see them, it's all awe and majesty and oh my gosh, nature. And Jurassic Park knows what it is, and it does that really well. Whereas Congo is trying to be Jurassic Park with a story that is nowhere near the same genre.
Yeah, it's Jurassic Park's paced a lot better too, because Congo, like we discussed, is trying to capture that old sort of 50s or 40s travelogue, jungle adventure film, and a lot of this film is just them traveling from place to place, and there's a lot of foreplay, and then by the time we get to the last act, the last maybe 15, 20 minutes of the movie, it turns into Aliens, or it turns into some other completely different film.
A movie which I would have enjoyed watching, by the way, even with the bad robot apes. I actually clocked it, and it takes an hour and 9 minutes to get to the camp where the inciting incident takes place.
Okay.
You have the inciting incident, which is Bruce Campbell's character, being attacked by the mythical white apes. Yeah. And then they're supposed to get back there. Well, it takes an hour and 9 minutes, which is almost the entire rest of the movie, just to get to the site. Yep. And that's not even like seeing the white ape. That's arriving at the location.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine if Jurassic Park took an hour and 9 minutes to arrive at the park?
Yeah, that would not be so good.
No. It is very well paced, and it's got an act structure that is tight as a drum, whereas Congo is literally all over the place.
Well, let's talk about the gorilla in the room. Let's talk about Amy.
Oh,
in this movie.
Amy.
Except for the fact that gorillas are sort of the problem, or I guess the hook in this film. Why are Amy and Peter in this film at all? Like after they begin this expedition, they get to the point where CIA lady is going to pay for it.
Right.
Why doesn't she just kick them off the plane? She doesn't really know that she needs them at all.
Well, then the movie makes a point later to say, thank goodness you have your ape, because that's the only reason we're letting you go.
My little gadget broke and I can't find the laser anymore or whatever. So now the monkey knows where it is because she remembers.
She like smells it in her own memories or something.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, right. But other than that, there's just like maybe in the book it was more clear as to why we brought a monkey along. But they combine these two. It is in the book?
Oh, the book is okay. So you've read Jurassic Park, the book.
Yeah.
And so you know that it is a huge part of that book is about chaos theory, right?
Yeah.
That's actually how they begin the different sections of the book is with Dr. Malcolm's chaos models.
It's like the iteration of a fractal, yeah.
Right. Whereas in the actual movie that follows, that's a very small part of the story. He gets like one monologue and that's about all that happens. Right. Well, Congo, the book, is about ape behavior and also to some extent American Sign Language.
Okay.
And it goes deep into like the history of studying apes. And I think that's really Crichton's gift is he makes that interesting. Like when I say out loud, oh, it's the history of primatology, like that doesn't really grab me. But the way that he describes it and the way that he draws these characters into it is so interesting. Yeah. And then you have the movie where not only do they not focus on that, but they make a point to have Laura Linney's character ask Peter, why teach an ape to talk? And he shrugs.
He has no answer.
Which is the dumbest freaking thing, because they actually showed us a clip of the technology with the talking arm.
Right.
You know, where they showed a person who was born without vocal cords being able to speak with the magic, what did you call it? The glove of wonder?
The power glove.
The power glove. So that, hey, look, there's a reason that you just put on screen. Like,
right.
But they, like, one of the things I was thinking of as I rewatched this movie is, what are they saying about academia and, like, doctors and professors who study things? Because Peter seems to have no idea why he's doing any of the things that he does. Right, no, like, right. Amy is like his child, and he raises her like a child.
Don't give him any more grant money. He's not going to discover anything at this point.
Right. And then, like, he is the worst professor I've ever seen. He can't even elevator pitch the project that is walking next to him as an ape.
Right, talking ape, yeah.
Like, you have a talking ape, and you can't explain what you're doing. What, you know, and in the book, they actually discuss, like, the budget of training Amy and taking care of her. And the book is much more interested in the concept of, if you teach Amy sign language and then you send her back to live among natural gorillas, what could you learn?
Yeah.
And, you know, and it makes a point to tell you that, like, there's an epilogue where Amy does go out into the wilderness and rejoin a gorilla family. But there's an epilogue where Peter, like, goes to Africa years later, sometime later, and he meets a baby chimp or a baby gorilla, and she signs to him.
Right, yeah.
Because Amy's been, like, teaching the apes. So it's much more about that and that science and that biology, whereas, you know, Peter in the movie is just a dunce. Yeah. And he's a very unlikable dunce, at least at the beginning. You know, he keeps trying to leave everybody. He's like, these people suck, and I don't want to be here with you. Like, you're all criminals, and I'm going to run into the gunfire of the scary guys with machine guns because I have principles.
Yeah, right.
Like, dude, read a room.
Yeah, he has no reason to be there. Even at the end of the film, like, Amy, like, grabs the glove herself and puts it on so she can go yell at the monkeys later to leave him alone. Crichton's books, I'm totally remembering now that I did read this book. I just probably read it really fast and didn't understand it. But I know that there's a lot of things in his fiction, or a lot of sort of things that he does. And one of them is, I love how he applies these scientific things, and then he takes it another step farther, and he always leaves his worlds, like, changed. Like, you know, Jurassic Park, you know, we live in this world now where somewhere on some island, there's pterodactyls who have gotten off the island. Or now there are signing monkeys. Or there is a bug from outer space that's somewhere in Andromeda strain. And then he also has these, like, sort of familiar, this is maybe just a author thing, like he's writing faster, he's not, like, big on character, but he follows a lot of the same character archetypes, I think. He's always got, like, a brainy mathematician or scientist guy who's sort of detached and explains everything. And then I always feel, and you were mentioning, like, the depiction by Laura Linney and Laura Dern before, but I feel like his female characters do tend to be sort of detached and not really in touch in a man's world, sort of. So maybe they're trying to be, like, real serious and not feminine. Well, and in the casting of somebody like Laura Linney, or definitely Laura Dern, they help to subvert that, I think, and bring more character to those characters.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I really liked Ellie, the book version, better. Like, I love Laura Dern, and I think she does a great job with the role she has. But Ellie in the book is a much more believable, like, she's a grad student. She's engaged to another grad student who is simply does not happen to be with her because she's working.
Right.
And so you get the sense that she has a life outside studying dinosaurs, which to me makes her seem like, or actually she doesn't study dinosaurs at all. She's a paleobotanist. She studies plants.
Yeah.
But you get the sense that she is a more full, like, has more dimensions to her life. There's just no reason to go into them for this story. And I can appreciate that. Whereas the Ross character in Congo is very hard and cold, and she's more of a one note. So, you know, they almost kind of flipped it for the movies. Where they sort of took a few dimensions away from Ellie for Jurassic Park and added a few dimensions to Ross for Congo, the movie.
Right. Yeah. the elements in this film, there are elements in this film, all the technological elements in this film are just added because it's a 90s movie, I think. Like, I think in the original book, the diamonds are for semiconductors, like in computers. It has nothing to do with communication or lasers or anything like that. And so that's in there just to be cool. And then, like, I was thinking about it, the talking part of the gorilla is not even, like, necessary. Like, it's cool that one guy in the video can speak to people that don't understand ASL, but for the monkey, we never ever really need that. Like, she could just come along because he wants to take her to the jungle. He could interpret for her. It'd give him something more to do in the film. But instead, like you said, he just kind of wanders around and is the guy who doesn't want to be in the movie.
Yeah, he's the, like, the dick character.
He's the stick in the mud.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, yeah. Honestly, it's been so long that I can't promise this since I read the book, but I want to say that the talking glove wasn't a thing in the book, or it certainly was not as much of a thing. They added that for the movie and emphasized it because they didn't want to have Peter translating every word she said.
Yeah.
And they also didn't trust audiences enough to know how to read. So they didn't put it in subtitles the way, you often see with ASL in movies now.
Yeah.
Apparently, in Hollywood for many, many years and still to this day, they do not trust audiences to be willing to stay with a movie that has subtitles in any way.
Well, you just watch The Mummy, and there's a lot of subtitles in that.
Yes,
yeah.
And so, this is changing in many ways, and I think the artist helped with this because that's a silent film where, you have to read in order to get anything out of it. But you're also having more hearing impaired characters and having more opportunities for texting and different things. I mean, now they will put subtitles up when characters are texting each other because that's easier than showing a phone screen. They'll actually put subtitles on the screen. So I think that's something that is has become a lot more acceptable since 1995. But at the time, they didn't trust anybody to know how to read. Like, anybody who buys a ticket to Congo must not be literate. So,
the science movie about lasers and gorillas. Yeah, right.
Can't be literate. So,
this movie amazes me because it was, made for $50 million, and maybe that's just Frank Marshall as a producer being smart with money. But it was shot on location in 2 locations in Africa. They shot in Costa Rica for some of the jungle sequences as well. And I think that it, for the most part, looks pretty good. It's either like a really expensive cable movie or like a sort of mid to low budget feature. But like I think it looks okay for the most part.
Everything looks okay except for the robot apes who are unfortunately in like every shot.
Yeah, well, there's nothing you can do about that. Yeah.
No, I'm not over it. I'm still not over it, man. I have not acquiesced to the robot apes. Like, it is just still so. Well, you know what? Like today,
you didn't buy her smoking that cigar.
Oh my
Come
gosh.
on.
I don't know if the cigar or the martini is worse. Like in the book, I want to say she does drink alcohol, but there's like an explanation for it where she's actually like a juvenile gorilla. She's old enough to kind of be able to hold her liquor, I guess.
She's 21 in gorilla years.
Yeah. No, but it's one thing to read it in the book, and it's another thing to have a robot version doing it.
Yeah.
But but seriously, think of the last. I didn't even see it, but I'm sure you've at least seen trailers for the most recent Planet of the Apes movie.
Yes.
Think of those apes, and then Robot Amy.
It's not even a contest. Yeah.
Like. Honestly, if I had all the money in the world, I think it would be fascinating to redo Congo and just put in like computer generated apes and see what happens.
Yeah. A young Andy Serkis probably saw this and was like, "It's not right.
I can do better."
Right. Well, Stan Winston did work on these robot apes, so
yeah, he should have worked longer. No,
that was one of the things that Crichton said. I read in an interview somewhere where they were asking him, like in the mid '80s, like, "Hey, why didn't you were working on this Congo thing?" And he's like, "We can't do it. Like, it's not gonna. You can't just have Rick Baker in a monkey costume."
He actually said it'll never happen.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not good enough. See, and I go back to like the world's most avoidable car accident where like it was so easy to like see it coming and to right the steering wheel and nobody did because they honest
Zipper
to God
merge.
did not have the technology to make this look real.
How would you compare or contrast this to another film from around this time, 96, 97, Anaconda?
Ah! Oh, Anaconda. I love you.
Are there diamonds in that too?
Who cares, man? It's not about that. Anaconda is about how fast and how hard Jon Voight can chew scenery. That is the only purpose to that movie, is to have everyone play straight against Jon Voight in an even more ridiculous accent. And one thing you got to give Anaconda credit for. So the snake, the anaconda, at least follows the sort of Jaws rules of not being on screen every minute.
Yeah.
You know, and not that the white apes, who I guess are the villain of Congo, not that they're on screen every minute, but Amy is, and she's terrible. Like, you know, it's ugh. But Anaconda, you know, they hold back the snake. You know, they don't have it on screen every second, reminding you of how much it's computer generated. So, and then they are able to play with it more, to play with more practical effects, and have like, I think I want to say they had an animatronic snake head. You know, so there's these sort of it's much more seamless. I'm not going to say it's completely seamless, but it's much better that way in terms of the creature effects. Anaconda also understands that its purpose is to be there as a creature feature.
Yeah,
and to do that as well as it can. Anaconda is like the best B movie that sci-fi didn't make. It's the best sci-fi movie that was not made by sci-fi.
It probably inspired all those, like Mansquito and all those sci-fi films.
I actually worked for Sci-Fi when I was in California. I was an intern there for USA and Sci-Fi because they're both owned by NBC Universal. And I was an intern my senior year, part of my junior year and all of my senior year. And then I worked there for about 3 weeks after graduation before we all got laid off. And that would be my sliding doors moment of my life. Anyway, I worked at Sci-Fi, and we would like have these tapes and scripts all over the place with these, the names of these movies. And so I was constantly just admiring them. Because they're not made by Sci-Fi proper. They're like contracted out. Like there is a company there are several companies whose whole job is to make those movies. So it's not like the same team that's like producing Battlestar Galactica or whatever.
Right.
So I would constantly be looking at these scripts and just respecting the genius of these puns. I love the way that these puns write the movie.
Right.
You know, mean, somebody was obviously sitting around a table, probably smoking something, and said, wait, man-skeeto. Just as many years later, somebody was probably sitting around a similar table, probably smoking the same thing, and said, Shark-nado.
Oh, my God. You know, Anaconda is like 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's even higher than Congo. Why do you think critics decided to just take the fungo bats to Congo? I mean, it's bad for sure, but it's probably about on the same level as Anaconda.
No, I disagree. Because
you can't get over these monkeys.
I honestly think it's the hubris of Congo, which is sort of ironic. Like, Congo is Congo is a movie that is all about how technology fails us, right? Okay. And the irony of that is Congo fails because of technology. Like, the robot apes ruin that movie. Yeah. So Congo wants to be Jurassic Park. Anaconda wants to be, you know, creature from whatever. Like, it wants to be a ridiculous B movie. Right. That's the goal. Like, Jennifer Lopez was not as big then as she is now. She was her fame was small. And Jon Voight was kind of the headliner there. You know, Ice Cube was probably more famous than Jennifer Lopez. And so that movie, it has no pretension to it. It's not trying to be Jurassic World. It's not trying to or Jurassic Park, I mean. It's not trying to outdo Jurassic Park. It's trying to make a solid little B movie. And it's very successful.
Sure, mission accomplished.
Yeah, no, it does everything it sets out to accomplish, which is so much more than I can say for Congo, which is just, it's so ambitious without having any of the integrity or maybe lack of integrity that Anaconda has. Like,
yeah, and everything's so rushed too. There's I mean, you can either do a one-note joke, which is Ernie Hudson is the Great White Hunter, or you could try to do like clumsy, unearned like social commentary on a lot of like stuff, like racial commentary.
Yeah.
And it's like called Congo, and they go through 3 or 4 African nations, and they try to tell you like who's fighting who, and there's the president is only president for a few weeks, he gets killed, and
his
then
car's blown up, and
right, yeah, and it's like, okay, but that's not we are talking about a talking monkey here, right? That's not really what the movie's about.
Yeah, I think Congo has no idea what it wants to be doing or what it wants to be about.
Yeah,
and as I was. And I like creature features. I think it's a really fun little genre. I'm a big fan of even the self-referential stuff, like Snakes on a Plane, which is Snakes on a Plane is like sort of the god of Sharknado. Like it is very meta, very self-referential. It knows that it's making these ridiculous paint strokes, and it just celebrates that. Like I'm good with that. I'm good with the like more serious Kong Skull Island kind of creature feature. I'm happy with all this. But Congo is trying to be, the lost city of Zinj and be the great white ape. There's like a 15-minute creature feature inside of this weird travelogue movie.
Yeah, which is poorly shot. At least for the action scenes, are not very good at all. The director does, like when they first see the monkeys or they attack them in the temple, he does this like slow shutter speed thing where it's all sort of blurry.
That reminded me so much of Snake Vision.
Oh, okay.
Because I know exactly what you're talking about because I made a note. Yeah. Like it slows, they go into slow-mo because it's the only way they can even try to make the apes look scary.
Sure.
And then poor Laura Linney is also in the slow-mo shot. Right. And she's like slow-mo waving a gun around. Right. And it's just like, yes, we are now at the snake's point of view.
Right.
It's so bizarre and ridiculous.
Well, you're kind of blowing my high here. I really like this film, or at least I wanted to like it really bad.
Well, get over it.
Yeah.
No, well, I love Congo. I watch it every time it's on TV. I stick around for at least a while. Because I think it's so fun, and I think it's so interesting the ways that, like, I'm a big fan of just kind of when bad movies are bad in a way that's interesting, Like, a recent movie I saw just off the top of my head was Atomic Blonde, which is a movie of action sequences and nothing else, really.
Yeah.
It's just spy tropes with, surrounded by amazing action sequences. And the badness of that is not interesting to me, Yeah. You can't just have a good time figuring out where they went wrong. Like, they obviously didn't put any effort into story except as a way to frame these, kick-ass fight scenes. So do you think there is an heir to Congo? Like a modern day something that pulls off what Congo is doing?
Stick with me
okay.
Here.
I'm already excited.
Through the sort of precepts that we've kind of set up, like a movie that has a lot to explain, has a lot to get you to sort of understand and buy, has technological challenges, and has to overcome sort of unscary bad guys and crappy action, The Matrix. The Matrix fixes all those problems. It also totally pulls the rug out from under you and has to explain to you like this entire different world. It's got philosophical underpinnings that it doesn't dig too deeply into, but there's a lot of Buddhism and stuff like that in it. And it takes a bunch of guys in black suits and makes them really scary.
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay, you're not buying it. I'll try again. What about? I'll need a little more time though.
Oh no, this is right now. The quiz is now, and you're being graded.
It's not an open book?
No. I never gave open book tests when I was a teacher.
It's a trick question because they don't make this kind of movie anymore. They don't do this anymore.
I don't see. I would have to disagree because the more we talk about this, the more I think The Mummy does this.
Well,
the recent Mummy, like the Brendan Fraser Mummy, is its own thing. Like that's very much trying to be like a romantic, 30s kind of homage.
Yeah, but in that way, I'd almost say that it's almost closer to Congo in its sort of old-timey structure. Because there is, except for there's a thing at the beginning, and then they travel for a long time, and you're like, all right, so you're going to get to a mummy eventually, right? And then they do, and then there's a big climax.
That's true. The Mummy definitely shows up a lot earlier in the more recent version. But I think that Congo is very guilty of trying to have its cake and eat it too. Like, it wants all the...
Sesame cake.
Yeah, it's sesame cake. Thank you. I can't believe that I did not get that pun myself. Like, it was right there, and now I'm embarrassed.
I actually wrote that joke in my notes, and I was going to see if it came up organically, and it did. So.
Oh, but see, now you've ruined it by saying that it was planned.
Whoops. I'll cut that out.
Okay, there you go, man. That's why you have your own podcast. No, right. I think Congo wants to be the King Solomon Mines Adventure movie, and it wants to be a creature feature, and it wants to be the new Jurassic Park by any means necessary. And so it kind of like 10% succeeds at all of those and 90% fails. Where I think the new Mummy movie is trying to be a Tom Cruise vehicle. It specifically vehicle for Tom Cruise. It's trying to set the groundwork for this new dark universe situation, and it's so introducing us to these different characters that'll presumably recur, like Henry Jekyll, and it's trying to just hold its own as a summer tentpole and a remake. So it's trying to have its cake and wear 8 hats too, if I can mix like 3 metaphors.
Yeah, that's fine. Maybe I'd throw in the Richard Chamberlain Quartermain films for canon, like the King Solomon's Mines, like the literal
You're going back.
interpretation of the story. I mean, those are really cheap and really bad, but like a canon film, they know exactly what they are.
It makes me just kind of wonder, like, maybe this genre should die, the Lost City, Lost World thing. Like, maybe in our time, and I'm just making this all up as I speak right now because that's the way to go. Maybe in our time of like hyper connectedness, it's just not a great idea to keep telling these stories. Like they've lost some of the appeal now that I could call Guam on my cell phone right now.
Right. Well, as a purveyor of tales about old legends that come out into the modern world, I think you should be careful there.
That's true. I still hold out hope for the dark universe. Which is probably foolish and naive of me, but nobody said that I was not foolish or naive.
I didn't say it. Let's talk about some of the critics' reactions to this film in a segment I like to call the Pick of the Patch, although I'm thinking about retiring that. Stephen Garrett of Time Out said that it was dreadfully muddled, but mildly diverting. And honestly, not looking at the site, I can't tell if that was a fresh or a rotten review. Sometimes it doesn't make any difference, And Roger Ebert himself said that it was a splendid example of a genre no longer much in fashion, the jungle adventure story. So he's feeding off the same thing that you were just talking about.
That's because I'm so smart and well-read and brilliant stuff. And I did go to school for 4 years to talk about this stuff. And this is the only way in which I'm currently using my degree. So we're going to cling to it. Sorry, Mom and Dad.
Glad to be of service.
I know, right?
So we've talked about it. What's your final recommendation? Would you recommend this film, or would you say stay away? Go into the jungle or stay at home?
I would prescribe this film with 2 glasses of wine after a particularly stressful day.
Okay, I can see that.
Like, same as another favorite, Jaws the Revenge. Like, do you watch this expecting intelligence? No. You watch this to, like, go on a romping, ridiculous adventure. You watch it with somebody that you like to make snarky remarks with. You do maybe a little light drinking or heavy drinking, if that's your thing. I don't judge. And and you have a good time. Like, just to see Ernie Hudson and Tim Curry just having just the best time. And I got to say that hippo thing was kind of scary.
And it's so short. I mean, I don't know how you do a whole hippo movie. Sci-fi could probably tell you. But yeah, that was a really intense scene, and it's just over real fast.
Yeah, it's true. If you like creature features, I do really recommend there's an Australian movie called Rogue that just does not get enough play. It's a crocodile movie.
Okay.
But it's like a for real serious. Sam Worthington has a smaller role in it. But then it's like Rhoda Mitchell and Michael Barton from Alias. So it just did not get a lot of talk, but it's a very solid creature feature film, like very suspenseful.
Rogue. I'll have to check that out. I would also say, yeah, I think you should check this out. I agree with your 2 glasses of wine theory.
Right.
I also just agree with your, open your mind, man, right. And maybe you really enjoy it. I also wanted to say, too, that this is another sort of a game or segment I'm thinking of having on the show, which is the Craft to Services Music Minute. And it's only when it has to do with one song, and whenever you hear it in a movie, we're going to point it out, and it's this theme song I'm currently using for the show, which is the Minuetto by Luigi Boccherini. It's that, I call it the rich people walking around music.
You're going to have to sing a few bars. Nice.
Yeah.
That is rich people walking around.
I'm not saying that it's like a hacky thing, except it's a hacky thing. Like in the Delroy Lindo scene, we need to show, this guy thinks he's, effete and refined, and he's going to eat sesame cake. And so in the background, that song is playing.
Is that song really playing in the background? I did not even notice.
It absolutely is.
I think I was just too excited about the sesame cake. I couldn't focus.
Or the way that he very particularly takes the bribe from them, and then he puts it in a paper bag and he staples it shut, and he's like, we don't want anybody peeking in there.
Oh, nice. And when I just love the way he says, more. Like, they give him a huge stack of cash. He doesn't count it. He just gives him this cocky-ass look, and he goes, more. Like, that is you are so rad, Delroy Lindo.
Yes. And you would go on to have a great ish career in the 90s doing character roles like that.
And doing much better roles.
Oh, definitely.
But man, he's one of those actors who is great even if the movie all around him is garbage.
Yeah, right. And a lot of the people in this film are kind of like that.
Yeah. And hey, respect for Laura Linney's remarkably feminist character.
And also respect for her. I mean, she shows the work ethic that's going to make her a great and well-respected actress later on. Because she could easily just went, who cares?
She could have phoned it in on this one. And no one would have blamed her.
Well, that's it, I think, for Congo. Thanks for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to let us know how you felt about this film, you can tell us on Facebook at facebook.com/Craft to Services. We're also on Twitter at Craft to Service. No S. We're also on iTunes. Search for Craft to Services there and subscribe, rate, and review us. It helps us out a lot. And we're also on Google Play, Stitcher, all that good stuff. Melissa, where can people find you online?
Well, I wasn't listening to you because I was busy trying to find you on Twitter right now on my computer. But I am at melissafolson.com. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook with just the username Melissa F. Olson. And Instagram if you want to see pictures of like chinchillas and dogs and conventions.
And where can people find your books?
Mostly on Amazon in select bookstores and libraries.
Okay, well, the credits are rolling. This is Aaron for Melissa saying, keep it real.